Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Thursday, June 10th Committee of the Whole Finance meeting to order at 6:01 PM. We'll start with roll call. Carl Johnson here. Sherry Gieske, Board Member Gieske is absent. Board Member Van Laar will be absent. Dave Wiltsey.
Here.
Ray Larson.
Here.
Steve Schabacher. Jeff Carlisle.
Here.
Ryan Curry.
Here.
Bill Robertson.
Here.
Sherry Bartell.
Here.
Rodney Riley.
Here.
Freddie De La Trinidad.
Here.
Next up, I'd accept a motion to approve the June 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting minutes and June for administration and the June 3rd Committee of the Whole administration executive session minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Carlisle, seconded by Mr. Schabacher.
Chairman, I had mentioned to Mr. Kaplan that there were some things that I wanted to make sure got into the minutes and wondered if we could postpone this till next meeting so I can present that in writing.
Any objections to that?
Well, I can't hear.
Bartell?
I can't hear it.
We can't hear anything he ever says.
There's some things in the minutes, there's the time of going into executive session, coming out, time of adjournment, that kind of thing. But there's also some substantive things I'd like to address by making suggestions, and I would like to put this off till next meeting if I could, so I could provide it to the chairman and the administrator in writing so that he could see it and you all could see it.
You're thinking to approve them? Are you thinking to be able to approve them then at the board meeting?
At the board meeting, yeah.
So what would, if I may,
Certainly. Mr.
what would
Carlisle.
make a difference doing them now than creating?
I have 4 things written right here, and none of them is as substantive as I wanted to do with respect to the special use.
I mean, you want to add, excuse me.
It sounds please tell me if I'm in.
You may recall I asked some very specific questions about the substance of the specifics of the special use.
Yeah.
And only one notation is made in the record, and that Wiltsey felt it wasn't detailed enough. But there are more specifics than that I think are relevant. I really would prefer to have those in the minutes than not.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so any objections to postponing that? So in that case, Mr. Carlisle, I think you made that motion, did you not?
I'll rescind my motion.
And we have a rescind on the motion and the second, and we will approve those minutes at the county board meeting.
Thank you, members.
Next up, on the agenda, I would like to make one amendment to the agenda. Under new business, I'd like to move 7.7 and 7.8 to the top, and we'll make those 7.0 and 7.05.
Second.
And in that, before you make that motion, it's not necessarily sale of delinquent taxes, but as I understand it, please correct me, Mr. Treasurer, if I'm wrong, it's the sale of surplus property. Would that be correct? Thank you, sir. So I'd like a motion to amend in that way.
So moved.
Mr. Wiltsey, is there a second? Second by Mr. Schabacher. Any discussion? Mr. Carlisle.
Are you going to amend the titles of those also? If they're not delinquent taxes?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was doing, is amending the titles of those to sale of surplus property versus sale of delinquent
Okay,
taxes.
I'm good with that.
That way it appears in the on the board meeting correctly also.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, public comment. We have one for public comment.
Mr. Chair, did you want to do the pledge?
We don't do the pledge for committee of the whole.
Just didn't want to get everybody out of the way.
Sure. Wendy LaFosse, if you could, please state your full name and address for the record, please.
At this point, you guys have got to have my name and address memorized, I would think. My name is Wendy LaFosse. I live at 523 Gaynor Street here in Belvedere, and I'm speaking on the precinct redraw. Once again, I'm going to call your attention to the state statute that governs the redistricting of precincts after a November election. Once again, I'm going to call on you to follow the law as written. I notice that tonight's board docs that you have a document that discusses precinct options, and you have 3 different options there. The first one is very simple. It says basically to follow the law. That one is the one that's going to make your life easier and be fairer to voters. We talked in the past couple of visits when I've talked with you about precincts that are either too large or in 2 districts, which are both not following state statute. But there's also a consideration that right now the city of Belvedere is in 2 districts, and that is also not following state law. So if you put off this redistricting of precincts, you're not only following the law, but you're forcing them into a bad situation as they do their remap. And as a citizen of Belvedere and of Boone County, I would hate to see any risk come to us that might incur our cost as taxpayers in this area. And that's a real problem that we face. Again, during this first option, you talk about different costs and people being on vacation. That's the cost of doing business. And this is not a surprise. The election was last November. And at your last meeting of the Finance Committee, the county clerk spoke and said, yes, she knew about the statute. She rattled off the number of precincts that were not following the law. So you guys weren't rushed. You had a chance to work on this. Your second option doesn't seem to have any basis in law at all, which really puts us as taxpayers at risk if somebody, some interested party, decided to make a lawsuit of some sort. What could have been, yeah, maybe sending out some extra voter cards is expensive. A lawsuit is much worse than that. And then option C, which says you could look at this in wait till June 2022. And you talk about not being able to do that because of the election. There's no basis in law for doing that. The only time you can look at it at the next June is for some reason you couldn't mediate it this year. And think about like if the pandemic just hit now and you couldn't meet, that would be an argument for doing it next year. It's not that, oh boy, we just found out about it, a month ago now. That's not the argument. So once again, because it's the right thing to do, because it's going to save money, and because you're putting not only the county but the city at peril, I just ask you to follow the law as written. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. LaFosse. Is there anyone else in the boardroom that would like to offer public comment? Seeing none, did we have any emails today? Okay. All right, before we get to presentations and things, some of you may not be aware, there was an email sent out, but in case you are not aware, Board Member Gieske was involved in a pretty serious car accident earlier this week, I believe Tuesday night. She's pretty beat up. She's still in the hospital. I talked with her husband this afternoon to see how she was doing. She's still there. She's doing better today than she has been. She hasn't eaten a whole lot. But she's in pretty rough shape, but she's certainly not life-threatening, which is a good thing based on what he told me about the accident. It seems as though she was probably within about a foot or two of being an even more serious condition than she is. So please keep her and her family in your thoughts and your prayers as she continues to recover from this. And we'll go from there. If you have any questions, later after the meeting, feel free to ask me or give me a call or whatever. But just to give everybody an update. So she's still there. Hopefully she'll be able to go home soon. Everybody knows if you heal a little better when you're at home and feeling a little more comfortable. So, and the hospital food's not so good either. But, all right. Next up, Treasurer's Monthly Report.
Good evening, everyone. I am going to jump around a little bit on my report to kind of go through how we got to this point. If you go to the Cash and investment balances page, that's the next page after the summary. There is a new fund listed, 131 ARP grant fund. That's the American Recovery Plan Act money. There's a total of $10.4 million that Boone County is going to receive, and half of it was received back in May. So we created a new fund for that money. So that is where it's at on your lists of funds there. If you go to the investment pool balance sheet, there is a new account there in the liquid accounts, the IME ARP. That's a separate account that I opened up at IMET, and that's where we parked that money now. Not knowing what we're going to do with it or how long it might take us to spend it. And most of us treasurers believing that we're going to need to be careful with how we account for the interest we earn on it. I felt it best to keep it in a separate account. So that's where that money is. So now we can go back to page 1 in the summary. And you see that the cash balances, all funds, is up $9.2 million. 5.2 of that is that ARP money. And there was also a property distribution made in late May that I'll discuss here in a minute. So that property tax distribution plus the ARP money, that is why the fund balances have jumped up so dramatically this month. That, I guess, that's all the discussion I have on the financials, on the report you have. I'll entertain any questions on this before I talk about a few other things.
Questions for the treasurer?
Okay.
Next up.
So you also see after the cash flow page, there is a page there that says settlement sheet. I just included this kind of an FYI. So every time I do a property tax distribution, and I do 5 distributions a year, every taxing district receives one of these settlement sheets. There's 50-some taxing districts in the county, Boone County government being one of them. So this is the settlement sheet sent by the county collector to the county treasurer. It shows the total amount that we're expected to receive this year in property taxes, that $12,369,000. And it shows the amount that, if you look in the middle of the page, the current distribution column is the amount that was distributed there on May 24th. So that represents about 34% of the property tax extension for this year. And you can see that it's divvied up into all those different funds. Most of them are county funds held by the county treasurer. Some of them are sent directly to other agencies such as the Extension Ed, the Veterans Assistance, the Senior Citizen Levy. Initially some of it goes to support our Fund 144, the Urban Transportation Fund, and then the rest of it will go to the Council on Aging. The rest of them are going to be reflected in increased fund balances on your fund balances report. Any questions on the settlement sheet? Okay. I threw in this month also this bank performance data. I think it was December when I did this last, supplying this information. So, I mean, bottom line is all of this list is a longer list than I gave you in December. I've got every bank that I'm doing business with here in any form or fashion is listed here on this bank performance data. Some of them, all they do is collect property taxes for us. We don't have any investments or other accounts there. But you can see that they're all well capitalized and they're all profitable. So last month, the auditor talked about banks providing collateral, pledging collateral to help secure our deposits that are beyond the FDIC insurance limit. That's one of the things we do to make sure that our money is secure. Another thing that I do is periodically check on the banks and make sure that none of them are, questionable in terms of their fiscal soundness. So that's just another little piece of information. Any questions on the bank performance data? Okay, so last month I told you that between then and now that I was going to be reaching out to the banks, looking for rates, trying to buy some CDs, and I said, we'll see what we get. And that bid process is recently completed just this week. I reached out to 14 different institutions. 3 of them did not respond at all. 4 of them responded with no bid. And 7 of them, or half of them, did provide me with some rates. More or less pleased with the rates that I received. They range from 0.3% to 0.45% for CDs of terms from 11 months to 18 months. So what that'll mean when we do this a month from now, that investment pool balance sheet will have a lot of new CDs on there being stretched out further and less money in those liquid accounts. So it seems like in terms of what we can get from our local banks, the rates are stable for now. So that's all I have, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Looks like you're free to go. Thank you, sir. Chairman.
Question.
Yes, Sherry?
I just have a question for Kurt. It's just, it's a very unusual question. Has the county ever, for good reason, held up not paying someone, or like say we're supposed to give so much to here, so much here, so much. Has the county ever held up not paying a account that we normally would pay?
Has the county ever held up paying an account?
Like you read off those that we pay, we get so much to the say the Keene Center.
Okay, so you're talking,
Have we ever held up not paying them?
so you're talking about the property tax distribution, I believe, and those pieces, those specific funds in our levy that are basically granted to other agencies. And have we ever held that up? Not to my knowledge.
Would there be any reason why we would or would?
I don't know why we would. The thing with the senior citizen levy and the Keene Age Center, the Council on Aging, it used to be simple. We collected these taxes from a senior citizen levy, which I believe was a referendum approved thing many years ago. So the people said, yes, you can levy taxes for senior citizen services. We levy the tax and we just write a check to the Council on Aging and let them do with it. And one of the things they did with it was they ran the buses around town, okay? Well then, because this is the state of Illinois, that's too simple. So the state of Illinois got involved and they said, you're gonna have to bid out that bus service that you're paying for with this. So what happened was, and this is probably the only person in the world who really knows what happened, is Ken Tirinoni. It was back around 2008 or 2009. So we bid out the bus service. RMTD, Rockford Mass Transit District, was the low bidder. So now we're gonna have to pay them to run the buses. So we created this urban transportation fund We budgeted for it. We keep part of that senior citizen levy, put it in the urban transportation fund so that we can pay RMTD. RMTD then subcontracted that service to the Boone County Council on Aging. So the Council on Aging is still running the buses. RMTD pays them, we pay RMTD. So the bottom line is it's just a more complicated way of doing it than it used to be, but we're still providing the same services with the same money. That's the long and short of it.
Thank you, Kurt.
Okay.
I think in that scenario you're talking about, Kurt, if I remember correctly, it had something to do with we could utilize funding from another source to be able to pay for it rather than taking money out of the general fund with the whole RMTD Council on Aging. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what clicks in my mind, that Ken came up with a way that, hey, we can do it this way. It's kind of weird, but
That's very possible.
paperwork says we can do it that way, so,
Yeah.
yeah. Any other questions for the treasurer? Okay. Next up, administration monthly financial.
Good evening. Kevin, could you pull up the second document up there on board docs? Thank you. So, on page.
Hey, Dan, you need to have a microphone. Maybe one, so, and people in the back can hear you, but two, so it gets recorded.
Yeah. Please state your name and your address.
No, Mickey Mouse can't be your name tonight.
All right, okay, so page one of the monthly financial report, this is for May of 2021. So this data reflects the actuals through May 31st of this year, which is 6 full months of the fiscal year. Right, we're at 50% of the year. So, these are important numbers to kind of look at, and I feel like it's a good touch point to really focus on these numbers. So on page one, here's where we talk about general fund revenues. As you can see, so general fund revenues, when we take out that local cure funding that we received this year, they're up 24% over FY20 revenues through May. So really outperforming where we thought we would be at this point. Really the main drivers for that, you could see and I think the treasurer mentioned it, but the property tax distribution in May was much larger than last year. So that's a big driver so far. Sales taxes continue to outperform what we projected, and we'll touch on that here in a minute as well. Other taxes, which is the income tax, the personal property replacement tax, those really continue to do well also. And then some of the fees, so the circuit clerk's fees and the county clerk's fees as well are doing well this year. So really all good news from a revenue standpoint. I did want to touch on, so if we flip to page 2 and 3 on the report, so that table on page 1, it only includes actuals through May. Every month when I bring this report to the county board, just this week actually, the state posts June's disbursement. So this week we got June's disbursements just a couple days ago. And so I always like to include that information here just because it is more up to date. And so the numbers that you see on page 2 and 3 for these 6 main revenue sources, those do include the latest data for June. And really June was kind of an incredible month for sales taxes. Kevin, could you pull up that PowerPoint slide if you have that? So I just wanted this was something I noticed going through the numbers. So what you're looking at up on the screen is essentially all of the individual sales tax disbursement totals for each month going back to December of 2015. And this goes up to June of this year. And so I don't know if you can see, but those dips every year, we normally see a dip in April, May, June, July. Really, these months are the low months where we would expect it to be the lowest. And we did start to see that last month, but this month's total sales tax disbursement was almost $350,000, which is the highest, at least going back to this December of 2015. It beat out that November of 2018, which was kind can see up there, the 328,000, and it's only the third time ever that it's been over 325 combined for the month. So it is something that's kind of an extraordinary month. I'm not sure why. It's something to do in the county-wide sales tax, so it's nothing that occurred within the city limits. It would be something that happened in the unincorporated county. I'm not sure. I would love to hear theories, but I just thought it's good data. It's just interesting to highlight. So again, it's a good takeaway. Sales tax is doing really well. We'll see if this continues or if it drops back down to what more of a normal month in the coming months. So that is really the revenue summary that I have. On the expenditure side, so if we flip to page 4 of the attached document, back to the financial report, really no surprises on expenditures. We're continuing to track just about where we'd expect. When we take out the election equipment from last year, the spending is up about 4% year over year, which is right about where we'd expect to be at this point. So again, I think the takeaway for the county board at this point, revenues are doing well, expenditures are right on track. So that's the report. I did want to mention just a couple other things, just really quickly, that are up on board docs for the county board as well. Every year, as part of the county's obligations to our bondholders, we have to do an annual disclosure. It's a continuing disclosure statement. That's up on board docs, and if you have just a moment to look at it, there's some interesting, it talks about the county's debt. It also compares our debt to that of other jurisdictions in the county and also in the area. And so on page 2 of that document, there's a chart called the overlapping bonded debt for the county. And I just think it goes to show that when you look at some of the other districts, school districts, even some of the other governmental bodies, that our county is in a good position. We don't have a huge debt burden as an organization. So that's a good position to be in at this point. And then on page 4 of the continuing disclosure, just something interesting, it also talks about lists the top 10 county taxpayers for the property taxes. And so, FCA or Stellantis is number 1. And you can also, just interesting just to look down at that list and see who's on that top 10. I also thought it was interesting that the top 10 largest taxpayers account for just 4% of the county's total EAV. So that was interesting to me. So that's up there, just for information for the county board. And the final thing that we have for the financial report is the Detroit News was out in the county a week or 2 ago, and a writer from the Detroit News and wrote a piece just about the Chrysler plant and the chip shortage and kind of the impact on the community. The board chairman was quoted in the story, as were other emphatists from Growth Dimensions. And so I put the PDF of the story up on board docs for if you wanted to check that out. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Questions for staff on the financial report? Mr. Curry?
Would that increase in June be just possibly from inflation, more money coming in with the higher prices of things, so it's taxed higher?
I honestly don't know. My hunch is that there's something occurring with some vendor, or it would have to be in the unincorporated, but there's some big sale happening that only happens rarely. It would have to be something like that, because it's just such a, in the 2 increases were only in the numbers for the countywide. So it was the countywide sales tax, which is the full county, and then also the public safety sales tax, which is also the full county. The county sales tax, which is just CT, which is our share of what's collected in a incorporated area, it was just a normal month. So it's something that happened in the unincorporated. I'm honestly not sure.
Mr. Newport?
There is discussion amongst the treasurers all over the state about the abnormally high sales tax dollars we're getting this month. So it's not just a Boone County thing. We still don't know why, but it's not just us, so.
Weird.
Do I hear another, we made an accounting error? Those of you that weren't on the board, the state did that to us one year. They gave us too many payments of something and said, well, so we're not going to pay you next year for so much. That was fun. I think that was around the recession time too, so made it even more exciting. But as far as the, Dan mentioned the reporter from the Detroit News was in. I thought it very interesting that a reporter from the Detroit News wanted to come and talk about the Belvedere Assembly Plant. Certainly raised some eyebrows from myself and concerns. What are they hearing in Detroit that we're not hearing here? So it's certainly things to be concerned about, things that we have to continue to try and do what we can to be as competitive we can. And kudos to Pam Fettis and Growth Dimensions. They're working their butts off to do what they can to make us competitive. We're not getting a lot of help from the state though, so hopefully we can find a way. Next up, new business. Sale of surplus properties. I'd accept a motion for resolution 21-13, sale of surplus property 03-22-177-012.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Curry. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Robertson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir.
point of order. Do we have to have a roll call on this because we're declaring?
I don't think we have to because A, it's a committee meeting,
Okay.
and B, because it's not entering necessarily a contract and we're not spending money. But Trish, if you're on the line and you want to weigh in on that, I'd be happy to hear.
Is this coming back?
Sorry,
Yeah, it'll be back to the full board. It has to go to full approval at the full board. So Trish,
I withdraw my.
hear the question?
I heard the question and that was going to be my question. I thought it was going to be on the meeting next week. So should vote on it by roll call then.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Next up, resolution 21-14, sale of surplus property 03-27-378-008. Accept a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Curry, seconded by
Second.
Mr. Schubacher. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, solid waste management plan, scope, service, and agreement.
Oh, we're not gonna.
Oh, well, I guess we can take a motion. Or we can, let's discuss first, just so people know what they're motioning on.
Okay, so tonight, before the board is a solid waste management plan agreement with R1PC. We are required to follow the Solid Waste Planning and Recycling Act as administered by the Illinois EPA, and it requires each county to review and update plans every 5 years and submit necessary appropriate revisions to the agency for review and comment. The act does not designate what information is required in the plan, but rather does just require information submitted to them. We actually caught wind of our plan needing an update as its last update was in 2006, so we're way overdue, but we received a FOIA request for that plan. And so we immediately engaged R1PC as they have qualified planning staff knowledgeable in this area and the practices and the requirements and the best practices associated with solid waste management planning. Winnebago County also has to update their plan. Our solid waste in Boone County is actually transferred over to Winnebago. We don't have a landfill here in Boone County, so our trash goes to Winnebago. So R1PC thought it'd be a great idea to partner with Winnebago County on this and submit a regional plan or at least some sort of a comprehensive partnership regional approach to the planning on this. So this plan would look at strategy and implementation for the next 20 years. And then we would continue to submit updates to the EPA every 5 years. So we can stand by for any questions on this.
Questions for staff? In that case, I need a motion to approve the solid waste management plan, scope, and service agreement.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Carlisle, seconded by Mr. Curry. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, memorandum of understanding between the county and Rosecrans Incorporated for the COSEP Grant Program Community Counselor. I'd accept the motion.
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Mr. Riley, seconded by Mr. Robertson. Discussion. Staff?
I can take this one.
Trish?
Yes. So part of the COSAP grant, there's two positions. One is the community law enforcement officer, which was an agreement that we had with the city. The second piece of the grant is a counselor that will be employed through Rosecrans, but based in the Boone County Jail. So based on that, we need a memorandum of agreement between ourselves, who are the holder of the grant, the health department, who is facilitating the grant, the sheriff's department, because that is where the person will be housed, as well as Rosecrans. So the agreement you see before you has been circulated between those parties, including Rosecrans' legal. So it just kind of outlines all the duties and what everyone's obligations are pursuant to this position. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for the state's attorney? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Tricia. Next up, fiscal year 2022 budget schedule discussion. Mr. Catlin.
Yes, I just wanted to include the budget schedule discussion, the budget schedule and discuss it. And what we plan on doing starting next week is to get budget worksheets to all departments, and then they'll have till July 9th to kind of go through their budgets and submit requests. We'll then in administration meet with them July 19th through July 30th. We'll schedule those meetings and meet with them individually to kind of gain an understanding of their requests and in preparation for bringing that back to the board and reviewing those. August 5th, we'll meet with the board at the administration committee of the whole and do an all funds overview and provide some information on all of the revenues related to funds. August 12th at the finance committee, we'll go through the general funds expenditure overview, and at that point, the board and those departments will be present. The departments will be available for the board members to kind of ask questions, because the board will be supplied with kind of the county administrator's recommendations with regard to budget, and then they also see the requests from the departments, and then the board can decide what they want to do with that information. And then September 9th, we'll do other funds expenditures overview, so that at a finance committee. And then when we head to October, we'll do a final budget presentation to the board, the finance committee, and then October 21st, we'll place it on layover. November 18th, we'll hopefully adopt the budget. So it'll move pretty quickly. I know it seems like a lot of months in between, but it starts to move a little bit quickly. We'll keep everyone informed.
Questions for staff? Thank you, Kevin. Next up, we have a TRC proposal for PVC replacement of landfill monitoring wells. Kevin, you want to give us an update on that before we make a motion?
Yes. So as you all know, TRC has been retained to assist the county and Belvedere with environmental support analysis reporting and that sort of work associated with the landfill number 2, which is closed. We're required to still report on each year as part of post-closure certification. One thing's to get us closer to that post-closure certification so that we end up reducing our costs associated with landfill environmental analysis would be to do something recommended by the Illinois EPA, and that's replacing 5 of these steel PVC monitoring wells. Steel monitoring wells and replacing them with PVC, and those will be the some of the wells closest or that are basically close up to the landfill. What that'll do is be able to provide TRC and Illinois EPA with information pertinent to VOCs. Right now, they're getting some readings that are, I guess, quite concerning to the Illinois EPA, and that's what's requiring us to continue all of the sampling and the analysis that we're performing. Their theory is that if we replace them with PVC, those contaminants which are elevated chromium and nickel concentrations in groundwater, they believe that they'll be reduced, and that that'll move us closer to that post-closure certification. City of Belvedere Public Works Director, I believe he's presented this to the city council there, because they contribute 50% of costs associated with things that we do there. So of course this would be contingent on their city council approving it too, and staff believes that this will hopefully get us closer to that post-closure certification, which is the ultimate goal.
Questions for staff? In that case, I'd accept a motion to approve.
So be it.
Motion by Mr. Carlisle,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Curry. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Field gaming terminal fee. Mr. Street. You have one of those wireless mics. Wandering around.
$189.
So, okay, sorry, video gaming terminal fee. So, this is just something at this point for discussion for the county board. There's no ordinance or anything to vote on or make a motion for. The Video Gaming Act was approved in 2009 in Illinois, which allowed for video gaming terminals throughout the state. And that law essentially allows non-home rule units of government, which we are one, to license video gaming terminals and then impose a fee of $25 for those terminals. A lot of counties do, a lot of cities do, some don't. Winnebago does, Ogle does, McHenry doesn't, Stevenson doesn't, so it's kind of across the board. But really, it's just something, we came across this and realized that we didn't have an ordinance. The code doesn't regulate video gaming at all, except prohibiting it in adult entertainment uses, so you can't have video gaming at an adult establishment. Currently, we looked at the data and it's publicly available information, but as of this month, or May of 2021, there's currently 41 video gaming terminals in the county. It has gone up. 5 years ago in 2016, there were 27, so it's something that's been slowly creeping up. Those 41 terminals are at 7 different establishments, and that's just in the unincorporated areas. We're not talking the city of Belvedere, Village of Poplar Grove. Really what we want to do is just bring this to the board. It's something that we could do. We included examples. There's the Winnebago County ordinance that they did back in 2012, which establishes a licensing program for those video gaming terminals. We included the Ogle County code language on video gaming terminals, and then the Tazewell County code video gaming licenses. And so, again, 41 terminals. We could license it $25 a year. That would be new revenue to the county of just over $1,000. But it's not about revenue. It's also about the discussion of do we want to regulate these? Do we want to know where they're at? Do we want to make sure that a lot of the counties have there's a requirement that if you have a video gaming terminal, you also have to have a liquor license. But again, we don't really address any of that at all in our county. So again, this is just for discussion purposes for the county board.
Questions, Mr. Carlisle?
Yes, Dan, what do we have for any type of regulations on video gaming?
Yeah, our county code, we allow it, but because we don't prohibit it, it's by nature allowed, video gaming terminals. The only regulation that's specifically mentioned, it's not mentioned in the zoning ordinance. It's only mentioned in that they're not allowed at adult establishments.
That's it. Okay, may I continue?
Sure.
How much taxes do we get out of these?
We budgeted this year, pull it up here. We budgeted We budgeted 65,000. The FY20 estimate was just under 50, but video gaming was shut down during COVID, so that was a low year. It's typically between 75,000 a year, and that's on the tax side. We get the taxes, but this would be a fee in addition to those taxes that we get from the state.
So we could either put a fee on the heads or we could probably do an additional tax.
The tax that we get regardless, whether or not we license it, we'll still get that state share of that video gaming tax. We get that now. This would just be, this would be a fee, basically, if we chose to license or permit those terminals.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Wiltsey?
Just briefly, $1,000 revenue is not much. I'm wondering what the staff cost would be to implement the program and everything, or is it more that you're looking for a regulatory way to find out where these machines are?
And that's something that we'd have to, it would most likely be administered through, I would guess, probably similar to like the liquor licenses. So it'd probably be a combination of the admin office, the county clerk's office. They do some of that licensing. So I'm not sure what the impacts would be on staff. From looking at the ordinances that are in place at other counties, I don't think it'd be overburdensome impact to do it. But that is something to think about also.
Further? Seeing none. Boone, section 20-05149-00-BR Wheeler Culvert Extension Award. So I'd accept a motion on this award.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Robertson, seconded by Mr. Schabacher. Any discussion? Mr. Crone, I see you're in the audience. Do you want to touch on this at all?
Pretty straightforward. There's two culverts. One is greater than 20-foot span, so it's a federally monitored structure. The other one's a smaller double box culvert. It was hit by a vehicle. It was fall of last year. They're both Florida Township structures. The impact from the vehicle required us to replace or to repair the box culvert to current standards. Bringing it up to current standards required quite a bit of construction. Like in all accidents, we go after the insurance to help pay for the costs. We didn't get anywhere, so that's been turned over to the state's attorney's office. And we went out to bid on the project last week, and we got results back that were very good, given current economic condition of raw materials. I think it's $212,000. So I do recommend that we move forward on it. The low bidder is one I haven't worked with before, but I have asked around, and they have a decent, a good reputation for a newer company out there. It's about all I have.
And Civil Works is the low bidder.
Yes. Yep.
Any questions for county engineer? Mr. Schwacher?
When would this take place, the repair?
So I talked to the contractor after it was determined that they were low bidder. They're very antsy to get their steel. Once they hear back from our decision, they're very antsy to get their steel set. So in fact, it expires tomorrow. They're what they bid their price on. So they're going to have to take the risk because our decision won't be made until next week at the county board meeting. So as far as the date that the construction would start, he said that it would be early August at the very earliest that it would start. He's got a window. He doesn't have a window of closure that within the contract. It doesn't specify calendar days. So he can choose to have that window earlier or later within the fall period or the summer fall period.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering with the problem getting materials, how that might affect them doing that repair. So.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, these contractors, they have an agreement with suppliers that for a certain duration. And, a lot of these, especially the steel, I thought we were kind of at the end of it, but we obviously are not. But so, yeah, steel prices are increasing still quite a bit. So yeah, that's a concern. And the $212,000 low bid is under the estimate, and it's a good price for this project.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Just to let the board know, I will be abstaining on this vote, as O'Brien Civil Works is one of my customers that I work with. So I'm staying on this one.
Good.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And one abstention. Thank you very much, Mr. Crone. Next up, any correspondence? Anything, Kevin? UCCI, anything from UCCI?
No, not this evening.
Okay. Reapportionment discussion. Gonna tackle this tonight? Do you want to?
I don't know if Tricia or Julie had anything. I'm not sure if Julie's on the line, but I thought they had information to share tonight.
I saw some stuff on the board docs.
Yeah.
Tricia, did you want to talk about anything, or did you just want to see what the board wanted to do, or?
Well, since last week, we did talk with Tammy Cox about drafting maps and using the different data. She was going to get some additional information about using the census data versus using the ACS data. And she will give us an update. We had advised her that we thought that the board might be setting some special meetings. So she would have that information for you for that time. She just was back in the office on Monday. In addition, I would think we were going to report back whether the governor had signed the legislation, and the last information I had that he has not yet at this point. Again, we fully expect him to. And then I think in addition to maybe, I don't know if admin has any meeting dates to propose, or we were going to maybe do that next week. I think the other thing that I had sent out was that there are other topics other than the maps that need to be addressed by the county board to give us some direction, such as if they want to change the number of districts that the county board is currently divided into, they want to change the number of members, if they want to change the compensation for members to the board, or the fourth one was a discussion regarding if the chairman should be elected at large or not. So I think all those topics could be open for discussion this evening. Again, not taking a vote on them, but at least having some discussion as to where the board falls on those issues.
Okay, when it comes to, Tricia, please correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to compensation for either board members or any elected official, we have to make that determination a minimum 180 days prior to the primary, is that correct?
Well, it's part of the reapportionment plan, as well as you can do it at any other time with county ordinance or resolution, but it does not go in effect until the next board members take their positions. So you basically cannot give yourself a raise, but it is one of the things that needs to be addressed in the reapportionment plan. And it's whether if you want to be paid annually, per diem, or a combination thereof. And again, it's fine to keep things status quo, but I think we just need to know where the board is, what their thoughts are.
Okay. Mr. Carlisle?
Since you brought it up, Carl, the item number 4, Tricia, on this thing, it says whether the salary paid for members be on per diem basis, annual basis, or combination thereof. I'm not in favor of changing what we currently have, but leaving it status quo.
I would agree with that. So
Anyone disagree? I mean, I think we'd all like to get $1 million a year, but we get a lot more people running for county board, that's for sure. But no, I would concur. All right, so let's check that off the list.
Okay.
Anything else? Anybody want to?
Numbers, how many board members? Probably, I'm in favor of keeping it the same no matter what changes district-wise, size-wise. It's not going to be to the extent where I think we're going to have to add or take away the number of board members. I would vote to keep it the same.
When it comes to board sizes, county board sizes, there's been several counties around us, Stevenson County, McHenry County, some of these others that have 24, 27 board members. And I know McHenry is reducing down to, I think, 14 this year. Stevenson County is working on a plan to reduce their number of board members. They're getting down to this 12, 13, 14 size, which is a much more manageable, but not too small. I would agree with Mr. Curry that I worry, I've heard some people talk about wanting to really reduce the size, maybe even in half of the board, down to 6 members or so. That sounds great on paper. My concern is when you have a smaller number like that, it's too easy for one faction of people to get I'm going to say a power grab, that you get too much control by too few people. I think with 12 members, it's worked very well for years that we don't always agree, and that's okay. And sometimes the board gets kind of split, and that's okay too. But it's tough to get strong control by one small little group of people. And I think we want to stay away from that. So I'm in favor of keeping it at 12 members also. Mr. Carlisle?
Back in the day, when we all first got on this thing, I did a study on how many hours it takes to do this position. And if we go smaller, those numbers go up. And it was 40 hours a month, if I remember correctly. I'll pull the data up and I'll share it with Kevin and give it to everybody else. But for the amount of work that we put in, the amount of reading, the amount of, I'm going to call it literature infrastructure that we put together, and by putting something together and looking at it logistically, it takes a lot of time. So going smaller may not be the best avenue. Even if our numbers in our population are going down, I still think that we need to be part of the solution for our taxpayers.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr.
I agree. I think we should stay with the membership numbers that we have now.
Okay. Anyone else? Looks like maybe we can check that one off the list. Number of county board districts. We have, Mr. Larson?
There was also talk of having the chairman voted by the board or by the public at large here. I don't know. I think having it by the board has been working fine. It seems like a concern is that the chairman is nominating people for appointments. And I believe that the chairman over the last couple of years has made an effort to make it more transparent. And, I'm sure we could work more to make it more transparent if people believe that's a problem. But I'm for the board electing the chairman. So,
Mr. Curry?
I also kind of piggyback on what Ray said is, and it seems like, when it comes to appointments, it's not only the chairman, it's us who vote on that. So we have to share that responsibility as well as this new bill that's getting passed that I think is on the agenda coming up, where we can actually pull those appointments if it passes, if they are negligent or they're not doing their job, which I think is not a bad idea either. We can't predict everybody that goes into those appointments and how well they'll do. You'll just hope for, going by their status and their past experience. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it in other counties. It become a very big nightmare. I watched our neighboring county basically self-deprecate and fold on itself because a chairman was elected by the people that was not supported by the board, and it was a nightmare in the media and in their government. So it'd be something I'd probably favor the board to have that control over, but I'd be open to support either side of it, to be honest with you.
Mr. Carlisle?
I just don't know how the transaction works by voting in or the people at large voting in a chair. I'm not sure how that works. I would like to see this, any structure that, when I see it over in Winnebago, I'm just baffled on how that is portrayed and put together. I'd like to see something, but what we have today, you're correct, Ryan, the vetting process is
is weak. And with that, as board members to vet people, we have to have statistical requirements on ourselves to be able to give to kids that walk in with aspirations of doing something, but they don't know what they're doing. And we have to be the teachers. And we were not very good teachers. So a couple of things I'd like to see what that is to vote in a chair by the public. I don't know what it would look like. It looks convoluted and difficult, but I'd like to see how that would work.
Ms. Bartel?
Well, I know both in District 3 and some of the people that I've been talking to, and a lot of people up in District 1 and some in District 2 have voiced an opinion as far as they would like to vote for the chairman of the board. They're quite out of joint about a few things. So that being said, I'm sure, and I'm going to go along with Jeff, we have to look at everything before we make this decision. But I think that we should have a special meeting on this and actually listen to what the people of this county have to say about it.
Mr. Riley?
Yeah, when I was running for county board last fall through the election process and through the summer, that was a question that came up among a lot of people that I talked to when I was out campaigning, is a lot of people weren't aware of how the county board was put together, how it operated and things like that. But that was a question that, and being new, I didn't know how to answer a lot of those questions. But the one question that was asked most often is how is the chair picked? How is the leader picked? And when I said it was picked by the 12 people that are on the board, a lot of people were very stunned by that. They didn't realize that that's how it worked. Now, I'm not going to say that they're not educated in the county board process, but be my guess, that's probably part of it. But that was one of the things that was brought up a lot when I was campaigning. Jeff, in my opinion, I think it would work just like any other election. It'd be a popular vote. I mean, it's done in McHenry County. I know there's been issues in Winnebago County. You'd have to go through the election process just like we do for board members. You'd have to go out and campaign for the job. But that's just some of the things that were brought up when I was out talking to people. And we've certainly had more than a few people come here and tell us that that's what they would like to see done. So I think it's something we seriously need to consider. Because I think if we don't consider it, it's possibly something that could be gone out and done by petitions, and it could be brought about by the voters on their own. And maybe that's something to look at as well. If the voters truly want this, that might be the way to go about it instead. So just throwing my 2 cents out of what I heard when I was out.
Ms. Bartel?
I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up. Tricia or Julie might know more about this than I would. But in the past few months, I have heard over and over and over again that they would, when it comes to elections this time, they don't want to R, they don't want to D, and they don't want to I. They just want to vote for the person. So eliminate the parties completely. And that's what a lot of people really want this time, because this last election got to be kind of really stinky. So people really want no Republican, no Democrat, no independent, just really, I guess you'd basically be running as an independent. And that's what they want. That's what I keep hearing. No R, no D.
Okay. Just one thing to point out, staff, I know did.
This is Julie.
Go ahead, Julie.
Is it okay if I speak to that?
Go ahead, Julie.
Okay. So that is something that by statute is required. Like for me, I agree. My office probably should not be have to choose a party, but we do by statute. So that would be something at the legislative, at the state level that would need to change. In my experience with people coming in my office to vote, we have a lot of people who are strict party lines and they just vote party lines. I have a lot of people who vote independently and a lot of people who cross back and forth. But again, if somebody wants to run independently and not run as either party, they have that right and option to do as well. And then going back to what Mr. Riley said, he's correct. So a chairman would be elected by a popular vote, just like the board members would be. And my understanding and talking to some of these other counties who have an elected chairman, pretty much the elected chairman does not vote. They're not a voting member, but they are someone who would break a tie.
If I could speak, I guess, this is Tricia, further to those 2 points. In Illinois, the county offices are set by statute. So the state legislature would have to make a change to county board or other county officials to be nonpartisan. There are situations where other municipalities, villages, cities can pass by referendum the ability to be nonpartisan. There are also special districts per their own code that are nonpartisan. So that's why sometimes you see local elections being nonpartisan, but not at the county level in Illinois. So that would have to be a state change. And then also as to the chairman, it is my understanding, like Julie explained, the person then breaks a tie. They are not a voting member, but they also do the other duties that are outlined in the county code as the county board chair, as our county board chair does now, such as run the meeting, make appointments with advice and consent of the board. Those things don't change because they're set by statute, but the person would be elected at large throughout the county to take that position.
Okay, thank you very much. And then just one further thing on that point, and we can talk about that particular point a little more as we get more research and do a little more digging on that. I know staff did some research, and I think there's 102 counties in Illinois, but about 70% of the counties vote their chairman in the exact same way we do. The only ones that do it differently are the ones around Chicago area and around the Quad Cities. That's basically it. Your really big ones that do it a little differently. Mr. Schwacher.
Yeah. Would that be an additional cost to the county? Would that be like, so would we still have, I'm learning about this, would we have 12 board members plus the chairman? So that would add a cost to our community to do that, I believe. Also, I think as we work as a group here and have for a long time, when we pick a chairman out of this group, who knows that person actually and how they act, how they run a meeting, or at least be involved in the meeting. Maybe I shouldn't have said run a meeting, any of us. As we watch each other on this board, watch how we perform professionally, who knows any of us actually better in this position as we are working for the public than we do. So in my opinion, picking the chair from this board would be a much better, process and get a better individual by doing it that way than if we went to by a popularity vote. Because as you know, popularity is, if you're popular, doesn't mean you're qualified. Anyway, that's what I think.
Sir. Mr. Wiltsey?
Yeah, briefly, I'm going to highlight for all of my colleagues what the state's attorney just said, and that is that even under an elected president, chairman, executive officer, I'm sorry, that person would still make the appointment choices with the advice and consent of the board, just like now. So if you want a different level of due diligence from the board members, that's great. But it's going to be the same thing. It's the executive officer making an appointment with the advice and consent of the board. That won't change at all.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up on that whole process, yes, Sherry.
I just have one thing to say. I feel that when we, in elections, or even for people that we put on a committee or put on a board, I think it needs to be put out there what actually that board does, what the requirements are.
I'm gonna stop you there. That's not germane to this discussion right here. I appreciate what you're saying, but I want to try and keep us moving along here on what we're talking about with reapportionment, and that's a completely different discussion. as far as, talking about appointments and all that kind of stuff to boards. This
No,
is talking about.
No, sir. What I'm saying is, when we have to make a decision for, are we going to vote for a chairman? Are we going to do it by the board? I think that there should be qualifications put out there for people, for the chairman, for the board, what he has to do and what his requirements are. And that should also be looked at. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I misunderstood where you were going with that. I'm sorry. All right. So we'll take that question up a little more as we move along here. Districts. How many districts? Right now we have 3 districts with 4 board members from each district. We've already kind of decided we'd like to keep the same number of board members. I'm assuming you want to keep the same number of districts, but I guess
That would be my preference, Mr. Chairman.
stay with 3 districts. Anyone opposed to staying with 3 districts? 4 members. Okay, we can check that one off. So progress, see? All right, perfect. Any other board member comments?
So we have one.
Well, you know what, before we go, before I move forward, we've got salaries the same. We've got same number of board members. Same number of districts, chairman by board or popular vote, still up in the air to be discussed, or TBD, to be determined. And then we're waiting on census numbers and things like that for reapportionment as far as size of districts, precincts, that kind of stuff. We're waiting for some more of that information.
And we're still okay on our deadlines as far as that goes, right? Waiting for the census information to come in for the precinct numbers?
Correct. Yes. Yes. If we were getting real close, we'd be really pushing.
No,
I think we've still got some time and waiting to see what the governor does for sure too. So perfect. And we will still schedule some additional meetings to talk about those population numbers too. Next up, board member comments. Mr. Carlisle, I think you had something on there.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to bring something to everybody's attention. Trish knows about it, and what it is exactly what Brian alluded to earlier. There is a House Bill 2806 that has been passed and waiting for a governor's signature. And basically it talks about a board, volunteer boards and commissions of, and giving the county board the ability to take those appointments away. That's the short synopsis. Everything you have on your board docs is what I found out in the state legislature. And I put, I do have some other things. If you really want to get into some of the meat of the thing, you can go into the state statutes and in the criminal law and find out what misconduct is. You can find out what official misconduct is, and you can find out what negligence is. And negligence is all over the board because it can be of duty, it can be of children, it can be just everything. But misconduct has some definitions up and down it. So if you want to have the time to do it, it's quite interesting, and it's a mind-boggling deal. But it finally gives every board in the county the opportunity to help these other boards that are in need, that we could probably do some assistance on it. And if we see this type of activity, we can actually do something. I think it's great. Thank you.
You know, on that topic, I'm glad to see that the legislature is allowing something like that to happen. If you remember, Jeff, I think you were on the board at the time, and probably Ray, I think, is the only ones that were on the board other than Ms. Gieske. We had an issue when I was first chairman, and I wanted to remove a board member from a board, and the state's attorney advised me that just because this board appoints them doesn't mean we can remove them. And it was a big to do, and I was extremely frustrated because that board member needed to go. With some coaxing and begging and pleading, they finally resigned their position and went away, which was about 2 months too late from the damage they did. But unfortunately, we found out how powerless we were in some of those situations. Mr. Riley?
It boggles the mind that this hasn't been law for.
Well, I actually presented an ordinance to try and pass
Sure.
with a, like a 3/4 majority of the board that we could remove somebody. But because the state wouldn't grant us anything, you know, and I understand why they haven't in the past, that you don't want to have a board just become a new board and just start picking people off for whatever reason. You don't want that. And I don't think it would happen around here, but in some counties in this state, certainly would happen. But perfect. All right. Any other board member comments?
We're safe, Rodney.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Carlon?
Yeah, one of the, there has to be, with this, there has to be some more criteria that is probably still hidden that we haven't seen yet. So I want to make sure the board understands there's more details behind all of this and how to and why, and things that we should follow, some SOPs I think are necessary.
Super. All right. I don't think we need an executive session this evening, do we? In that case, we're just looking for a motion.
Motion adjourned.
Mr. Carlisle, seconded by Mr. Curry. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sure no one is opposed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for keeping a fast-paced, efficient, smooth.